I thought about this a lot. So I'll start with a hot take. Hot take: the film ending is better than the book.
1, 2, 3, 4. Shelf Destruct.
All right, boys, welcome back to the Shelf Destruct podcast. Good to see you again. And today we're going to kick off a new segment that I'm pretty excited about as someone who loves watching film. We're kind of calling it Is the Book Better? One of our first kind of segments just to dive into the many adaptations of great literature that eventually get turned into film. So what better way to start off with, one of our favorite authors, and one of the books that we've already read together, which is Kurt Vonnegut's Mother Night. Super excited to get into this one, and I'll set us up with a little bit of a cast information, and then we'll dive straight in. So we're talking today about the 1996 film adaptation of Mother Night, starring Nick Nolte as Howard W. Campbell Jr., stars Cheryl Lee as both the Helga/Rezi characters, Alan Arkin, R.I.P., as George Kraft, the friendly neighbor/Russian spy, and
Sounds right.
John Goodman, who plays Major Frank Ortonen, and that's our core cast. It's a pretty stacked lineup, and honestly, I was pretty surprised going into this and seeing the names. I think I also saw Kirsten Dunst as a young Rezi, which was really surprising. So a lot to talk about in this one. Jensen, I want to get your initial thoughts. Kick us off with what you felt.
Yeah. So first, I do want to talk about the cast. I'm glad that you read off that cast. One, Nick Nolte is a name that I associate with like old Hollywood, and realizing that film was from 1996, it's weird. Like I feel like I haven't heard his name associated with like films past that era. So I always think of like, I don't know, like 60s era Hollywood, and he was not, I guess he's not that old, but, and then, fun call out for me. I love that movie, Little Miss Sunshine, and I love that Grandpa was, played, Potapov. So that was really great. But I personally, something that stood out to me was that the book, like all of Vonnegut, is really zany and is like this kind of dark gallows humor. And I feel like it didn't really communicate with the film adaptation. Some of the jokes from the book are in the film, but it felt more like a World War II drama opposed to being this zany, Vonnegut style dark comedy.
Go ahead, yeah.
I would agree with you for sure. There were several moments which I remember playing out in the book that played out on screen, and I feel like I saw them differently in the book in my head. Like they were read more humorously in the book than they were in the movie. And I agree. I definitely felt there was this not that both books they carry a heaviness throughout the entire story, but it certainly was missing a little bit of that Kurt Vonnegut zaniness for sure.
Yeah, that definitely seemed like that was a creative choice that was made. Like, the book doesn't have a ton of like quote unquote jokes in it. The humor is more so in the juxtaposition between like some of the characters, like particularly the Black Fuhrer of Harlem. Just that anachronism is really funny. There are a couple of like actual jokes that I can think of that were left out of the film, which I was a little bit disappointed by. Like, I did mention that like one of my favorite parts of what I thought was one of the funniest parts of the book was they actually kind of did something similar in the film with remind me who the Nazi was that had the cell above him in the film.
Eichmann.
Yeah, Adolf Eichmann. In the book, there's a really funny scene where Eichmann is asking Campbell about how to get a literary agent or something like that. And instead, they kind of choose to make Eichmann a little bit more serious. And I actually think, like, pretty effectively, there was one scene in particular that we can talk about later where they chose to make him a little bit darker than in the book, where I feel like he's a little bit, like, I don't know, more of a heel, in the book, in the very, very short amount of time that you get him in the book. I will say, just while we're talking about the cast, great cast. I thought Nick Nolte was great in that role.
Yeah.
He plays both stages of life really well. He's like he's in his 80s now. Like so he would have been, I mean, this was like right at 30 years ago, so he would have been in his 50s. So he convincingly plays the younger and the older part really well. Great actor. I mean, really everybody in the movie was really good. I was kind of surprised because you don't really hear many people talk about this movie at all, which was just sort of surprising because there's not that many Vonnegut adaptations out there, mostly because, I mean, I feel like a lot of his stuff would be really hard to film. But this one works really well as a film adaptation. And I was really pleasantly surprised with how good I thought the movie was, honestly.
100%. The one thing I will say, which I think was done really well, was the reveal of the Black Fuhrer of Harlem.
Yeah.
To see him shown on screen was genuinely hilarious.
It was really funny. Yeah.
It was just shockingly well done. And I think they even play with some of the camera a little bit. He's just like really in your face. It's just very like obnoxious, and it's just quite a character. And I thought they actually cast him well. And I should have looked up who played him in the film, but that part was genuinely, like, I was like, well done, well done.
Yeah,
that was shown well. They built him up to be very well in the movie.
Yeah, I agree. I loved just at the very beginning. I loved how the opening credits used White Christmas. Obviously, that was a little bit of a nod for book fans. I mean, the song still plays a role in the film, but just like the cold open with White Christmas, I thought was a really great choice. Just as not really an Easter egg, but it just immediately I was like, okay, they're adapting the book. They know exactly, what they're going for. And I forgot about this during our first discussion, what the potential significance of White Christmas is, other than it being just kind of anachronistic and kind of funny that all the war surplus records that he gets is just 1 million copies of White Christmas, which, I think would have, been a big World War II song for, troops dreaming of being back home. And I'm sure that was part of the, humor / kind of longing that is exemplified by that. But I also totally forgot that Irving Berlin wrote White Christmas, who's a Jew. And that's just like another really interesting layer that Vonnegut probably did on purpose, is like, because of how prominently the song plays both in the book and in the film, it almost serves as like a constant reminder to Campbell about what he did to those particular people, which I just totally slipped my mind when we were talking about the book. But then I, was hearing the song and I was like, oh yeah, Irving Berlin wrote that. That's actually like a little bit of layered meaning there.
That's really cool. I just wish that I could have gotten the joke, or it's not really, I guess it's not really a joke, but it's like just a funny interaction between him and Rezi before he finds out that she's Rezi. And they're talking, like, trying to like get to know each other again whenever he thinks she's Helga. And I think in the book he asks her about, like, do you have a favorite song? And she says no. And he's like, I've got a favorite song. And she's like, what is it? And he says, Bing Crosby's White Christmas. And it's just like this really silly thing where like he's become obsessed with this song because he's got like 70 copies of it. Right. And those are those little moments where like it's like silly and zany in the book that you kind of lose with that film adaptation. And I think maybe there's a part of that, like, coming out in the 90s, World War II survivors were still concentration camp survivors were still young enough to be like, most of them, alive that survived. And
Oh yeah,
I wonder
for
if
sure.
there's if they chose to tone down the silliness out of like some form of respect, because the book does deal with like this really serious subject matter.
I think that kind of it struck me that might have been part of the choice, and I also, the book or the film adaptation also, I think it hammers home the guilt aspect that Campbell is feeling a lot more by there. We'll talk about a particular scene a little bit later in the movie, but I feel like the whole just sort of like Holocaust guilt stuff is a little bit more at the forefront of the movie, or at least that's how it struck me. Like it's in the book, but it's not as explicated because one thing that I wanted to bring up with just like the difference between the two mediums is they're the same but different. So the book is you're reading the first person account memoir of Campbell, and that's how they set the scene in the film. They bring him his typewriter, and they say that, the Haifa Institute, requires you to write your memoirs. You have however many days it was, a couple weeks or whatever before your trial starts. Get to typing basically, and then the film sort of uses that perspective of Campbell being the narrator, but it offers you a little bit more than just his perspective because of just the medium of film. We're able to see a little bit more going on. And in the movie or in the book, we only ever know what Campbell tells us directly. So I felt like there was a little bit more of visual subtext they were able to do with the movie that drove that particular Holocaust guilt stuff home a little bit more, at least to me.
One of the things I would dial in on that and just agree with you, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I believe all the prison scenes are in black and white.
Yeah, which was kind of evocative of like Schindler's List.
Right.
Wasn't that
right.
whole and I don't know which came first. They were pretty contemporaneous. I feel like they were right around the same time, but
Right. But if you talk about artistically and stylistically to like make that feel heavier, when he's living his life up until the moment of prison where he's writing these memoirs, it's in color, right? And so he's seeing the world in a different bit of a view. And then when he's in the prison and having to recall this and probably living with all that guilt, suddenly the world's in black and white, which, in some ways could be, people refer to that as like, more of a binary choice, right? Maybe
Right.
he's realizing exactly who he is and how he feels when he had been struggling with that answer earlier in throughout his life.
That's a good point. I like that actually. I didn't really think that far into why, what that choice could represent, but I think that's a good call. That's good.
It's tough. It's really tough. One of the things I struggled with this movie, and this is just the natural happenstance of any time a movie is made out of a book, is pacing, right? You have to fit so much context and so many small, subtle moments of character development into this well-paced, keep your attention, hour and a half, roughly 2-hour film. That is tough. And I think that was one of the harder parts because for me, just obviously in that translation, you lose some of the character building of Howard W. Campbell Jr. as a Nazi propagandist and like really the extent to which he influenced, so many people in Nazi Germany. And I think they did a good job of showing him. And, I think the radio broadcast scenes are unbelievably
They're
done.
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're really good.
I wanted to comment
go
on
ahead.
that specifically.
Go ahead,
The writing for those sections was really good. That's all I wanted to say. Sorry.
Oh, well, the actual speeches that Campbell gives, I'm pretty sure they used speeches that Goebbels gave. Like those are actually
okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I could be wrong. I didn't double check this before we got on and started the podcast, but I'm pretty sure I remember hearing that those were Goebbels' speeches that he gave on the radio.
Well, that's
which adds an extra like chilling aspect for sure.
No, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. It almost recasts him as being the chief propagandist.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't. That didn't occur to me.
The other small artistic note that I loved was just the zoom in on the SS symbol on the typewriter at the very beginning of the movie. I just like I was like,
good.
wow, that is well done. You know, chilling, very chilling. And
Yeah, they
Here you
did
go,
a lot
Nazi.
of.
Here's your Nazi typewriter, you Nazi.
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
exactly.
Oh, and I liked to because we already read the book and we talked about this quite a lot at the end, that like one of my broader points about the kind of moral aspect of the novel was that Campbell feels that he not only deserves but like he needs to be punished for his own conscience. He needs to be punished, right? And I thought that the filmmaker, I think the director Keith Gordon, and whoever the screenwriter was for this, I'm not sure how much of a hand Vonnegut had in the screenplay. I should have probably done a little bit more research on that, but in that opening kind of scene that he brings in the typewriter, and I think one of the prison guards says, do you need anything else? And he says, no, this is great. Thanks for everything. And like if you don't know anything about the story, I bet that scene is like kind of jarring. You're like, what a weird thing for this imprisoned guy who we don't really know a whole lot about yet to say. Like, but for those of us that have read the novel, it's like a perfect. That's like, of course, that's what he would say. Like, if Vonnegut didn't write that line, then whoever wrote that screenplay like perfectly understood the character, I thought.
Curious if you guys think, Taylor, you just mentioned this, if you like had not read the book, how the movie would translate. How do you think that, I mean, it might be impossible for us to say because we have done such a deep dive into the book, but I'm just try to take the film alone. If you had no other context, you just would watch the movie. Do you think you would grasp the actual challenges that he had and the struggles of his identity? Because for me, I felt like that was a little bit it wasn't missing, but it was just, like I mentioned, the pacing. Kurt Vonnegut just brings you into his first person perspective, and you sit in it, and you're dealing with it the entire book. Mm-hmm. This one, they had to move scenes to fit the entire narrative in. I don't know. I wonder if you had only seen the movie, could you grasp the weight of it?
I think so. Particularly because they took like some scenes pretty much verbatim from the book, like line for line. Particularly the scene with his father-in-law when he pulls up to the house on the motorcycle. That scene, I mean, I could probably go check the script, but it was like almost line for line the conversation from the novel, which was essentially like I used to think that you might be a spy, and then I realized that I don't care. Because even if you are a spy, there's no way that you could have helped the enemy as much as you helped us, because you were, a big part of convincing me that Germany hadn't lost her mind or something like that.
Right.
And that's like directly from the book. And I feel like if you were just watching the movie, I think they did a good enough job of including scenes like that and then some scenes later, like the Eichmann scene that I kind of already alluded to that we can talk to as we get through the plot a little bit more. I think they hammer it home well enough, but that could be colored by my previous understanding of the book. But it seemed to me like they cut what they needed to cut in order to make up for time, but they rewrote certain parts to make sure that moral conundrum was at least explored enough for the ending to have weight, I thought. But it might be interesting to have someone watch it who hasn't read the book and see what they think.
For sure. One of the things I'd be curious, was there anything in the movie that wasn't included that you wished was? Any particular scene or moment?
They changed this a bit in the film adaptation, and I thought it kind of it sort of changed a little bit of the meaning for me. And I can't remember the character's name, but the U.S. soldier guy that reappears in New York City, he was I think he was, he was gonna hang him right after that scene that we just talked about, where he's riding his motorcycle to the countryside and he gets captured. And this happens in the book too, where he basically points these Nazis that he's just hanged and is like, you're next, basically. And then he ends up getting away or whatever. But he comes back, finds him in his apartment after it's kind of like revealed where he's hiding out. And the scene in the book I thought I liked better, where Campbell actually fights him off with a fire poker. And it's just sort of, I think that the meaning has just changed a little bit, because it kind of gives an interesting character arc to the soldier, who is now older and isn't as dangerous as he was, would have been, however many, 20 years ish prior. And so I just kind of liked it in the book. I think it was effective in the movie, but it just sort of, I know why they did it, because they needed to teleport Campbell to the basement, and
Right.
getting him there, I'm sure, was like something that they had to figure out with the screenplay. Like, how do we've got to get him down into this basement with the white Christian Minutemen people, and we don't have as much time. What do we do? And I thought it was effective. I think I preferred the book scene personally.
For sure. Jensen, what about you? Was there anything that was missing that you can recall?
No, not really. I mean, it's all, for me, all of the scenes that I would have liked to be in the film are all smaller pieces that either, for probably mostly, were things that had to be cut for time because they're not these major plot points. But I love being able to see those little scenes that add motivation in the book. For example, we see Campbell getting on this motorcycle and riding around, but like I feel like the scene that leads to him, like where he's hanging out with his buddy and he's like, "Hey man, can I borrow your bike?" And
Oh yeah, that's right.
yeah, and like it's not important for the plot in terms of the film, but it adds like this additional color that you really can only get from the book. And it's all those things it's all those small things kind of accumulate over the course of a film that you get so much more by actually reading it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. I also think some of the detail into the life of the dentist is just incredible backstory and bizarre. While I think they did a really good job of showing him and introducing him to the audience, there's definitely just some of that detail that really paints the picture of just a truly almost unbelievable individual.
Yeah,
Strange.
that is where some of the humor was lost for sure, because his whole backstory is so funny but also tragic in a weird anachronistic way, because you don't want to feel sorry for this guy really, but Vonnegut kind of forces you to feel sorry for somebody who's like completely odious and like, but he's like pathetic at the same time, even though he's like completely crazy and evil. Like that's like kind of an interesting thing that Vonnegut does stuff like this kind of a lot in his writing, is like he kind of forces you to see the humanity in people who you do not like and you shouldn't like, and I there would have been just no good way in the film, I think, to do like a change of perspective, like a literal change in perspective, in order to get that backstory. And it works in the book because it's more believable that like at this point Campbell has all this additional background information on this guy that he's met. And it just, I can see why they weren't able to shoehorn that little bit in, because it just would have been, an extra 20 minutes of film that, they probably didn't really need, but it does really add a lot to that whole arc. And I also think it helps, that backstory also helps hammer home how Campbell's propaganda affected people in the United States, which you get a little bit more of in the book, which to your earlier point, Will, like for a non-viewer, that helps sell his guilt a little bit more in the book.
100%. Question: do you think that this story could have worked, or even worked better, if it was a miniseries?
Ooh, a miniseries, yeah, but it would have to be like only maybe 4 episodes or something.
Yeah,
you know, it couldn't
4 or
be
5
like one of
episodes.
these new ones where they do, you know, a 12 episode. You would be making stuff up and adding stuff, which I think could be done well, but you know, a 4-part like BBC style, you know, miniseries, I think could work really well, and maybe they'll do it. I mean, why not adapt this stuff again? You know,
Everything's coming back.
yeah,
For sure. Yeah.
I know. I think they did a decent enough job where I would like there's several of Vonnegut's books that I would rather see turned into a miniseries.
yeah. Like
Just 'cause,
Slaughterhouse
like-
5 would work pretty well as a series, I think. Cat's Cradle, I think, would be like the next one that I can think of that would be the easier one to film.
Yeah, I just think Sirens of Titan would just be so much fun.
It would be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I feel like I heard something that somebody is trying to do an adaptation of Sirens of Titan, but I don't know if I just hallucinated that, like, or if I actually read.
You're trying to will it into existence.
Yeah. I will say, I thought, and I mentioned this already, but I was really pretty impressed by the screenplay. So there's a couple of little additional things that weren't in the book that were in the film that I thought were really good. There was a great line that I wrote down, when Campbell is hanging out with, Potapov, you know, in that scene. I thought the film did a good job of like building up their friendship and stuff, and I feel like they really kind of gave him a little bit more personality, that you don't get as much of in the book.
I think that's a
But-
testament to Alan Arkin, though. He plays
Yeah,
that
they
character
couldn't
so
wait.
well.
They couldn't waste him. You know, he's just he's so good at every role I've ever seen him in that like I feel like they gave him a little bit more to do, which I liked. And he says at one point, you know, are you gonna, you know, you should start writing again. And he was like, you know, dead men don't write too well. And he says, nonsense. All the best writers are dead. And I was like, that's a good line.
Yeah.
I like that line.
Really well done.
And there was another moment like that, where the scene happens in the book, but you don't get the set dressing. You know, you could argue that this is a little bit on the nose, but I thought it was a brilliant scene where Campbell meets with the Blue Fairy Godmother with Wirtanen, for the, I guess, like the second time that we see him, or the third time we see him in the movie, I believe, where he leaves the basement. He gets that note and it was like, you know, go out the coal chute and meet me, basically. And he walks through this door and he's on this stage in this like dilapidated theater with Wharton and, you know, with John Goodman sitting there clapping, I think, sitting in this couch, like in this dilapidated theater. And I was like, that's a really good visual, I thought. You know, a little on the nose to an extent, but like, I thought it was really good. I thought it was a great scene.
I mean, if you're turning it into a movie, like, might as well lean into it. You know, like,
Yeah.
might as well. If you have the option to show it. You know,
100%. And
I mean,
you know, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, and it goes back to the fact that, like, if you hadn't read the book, you might have missed some of that subtlety that Kurt Vonnegut, you know, provides, that narrative subtlety. And this helps really just reinforce what the main points are, you know, throughout the story.
Yeah. There's another like good line like that, which like the thrust of this is in the book, but I don't think they say it the same way as they do in the movie. But this was like the first time that he's confronted with John Goodman in the initial offer, and he's kind of you're kind of getting his internal monologue of like why he accepts the mission, essentially. And he said it's like every writer's dream, write and play like the most difficult possible character, or something to that effect. Like it was like the role of a lifetime, and it's like, you know, kind of leans back into the theatrics of him being a playwright and all this kind of stuff that I thought like did a good job of, you know, in the book, you know, the idea was, I had to do it because I'm a ham and I couldn't resist the opportunity. And it's the same idea in the movie. They just kind of hammered it a little bit more on the nose, which I thought it was a good line too.
Well, I think that's where I'm talking about, like, saying like, "Oh, I'm a ham," and so I had to do it is funnier than being like, "It's the most difficult role," and it's the
For sure.
It's
yeah,
yeah,
and you could tell that like the tone they chose was a little bit more serious, and the moments of zaniness almost don't land in the same way because they seem to come out of almost nowhere. Like there's not very much humor, and then you get the Black Fuhrer of Harlem with the camera angle right up in his face, and it's really funny, but it's like it's kind of anachronistic, and you're just like kind of not pulled out of the movie. You're just like it just makes you feel strange. It felt like a Kafka moment or something. You know what I mean? Like kind of out of it was just like out of the normal of what was going on, which it feels that way a little bit in the book as well, but in the movie I just thought it was a little bit more pronounced when those zany characters are really brought to the fore.
All of them, I think it really amplifies how insane all of them are.
Right.
Because the first thing that the Reverend Lionel, whatever, DDS, he praises Kraft's painting of Campbell and asks if he has.
Or something.
Yeah, he's like, "Do you have any experience in dentistry?" And like, because you don't have his backstory, it does feel like it just comes out of nowhere, except for the fact that he introduces himself as DDS.
Yeah. And you don't realize that his whole thing is like dental eugenics, essentially.
Yeah.
Like it's implied in the movie, but in the book it's like explicit that that's like his whole thing is like examining people's teeth and jaw lines for like Aryan identity or some stuff. It's like totally crazy.
Yeah. So those characters all are like super wild. I think it does add, like, do something in the film whenever they are so stark in contrast, being so ridiculous. And I feel like it adds that bit of whatever you would call it, that he has literally run out of options to have any sort of help. And so he's scraping the bottom of the barrel for this, psycho dental eugenicist, and the Black Fuhrer of Harlem and Crap Tower, craps out,
keeling over.
Dies.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think that is like an important point too, because a lot of what seems like a joke, I'm pretty sure that like the Black Fuhrer of Harlem character, like there was a historical figure that was like that. I remember I read about him somewhere, like completely unrelated to Mother Night, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's what he was getting at. But like in the 60s in the U.S., like of course these people are ridiculous. Like it could only be ridiculous, and like so many of that, a lot of that line of argumentation is ridiculous on its face to a lot of people. Like the dental eugenics thing is only partially a joke. Like people were like, measuring people's skulls and stuff, which seems silly now with what we understand about like, biology, but like the physiognomist types, and like they're only slightly exaggerated in Mother Night. Like there are people that thought and think this kind of stuff, which we should laugh. Like, it should be like, we should make fun of them, honestly. Like,
for sure. Yeah. I mean, to both of y'all's point, I think maybe that was intentional, just how bizarre they came off on screen, because it does paint this picture of like, if you believe this to the fullest extent of what you think, it's your characters. Like this is like, this is not even real. Like y'all are believing this purely unbelievable, bizarre, just philosophy. I don't know, just something about these characters just comes off so stark to your point, and I think it really, like, when you see it on screen, they do paint it well as just being this like counter to Howard, who maybe.
And I think Vonnegut says this in the book, not this exact phrase, but there's an idea in the book already that, like, once we kind of do that historic, the flash forward in time a little bit, and we're in New York. That these people, like, he says something about how, like, all of the remnants of, like, the American kind of fascist supporters of Nazi Germany have, like, died off, and there's not very many of them left. And, like, what you said with scraping the bottom of the barrel, like, that idea is very much in the book of, like, the only people that are left are these weirdos that, like, send around their own magazine that they make in their weird basement with a bunch of weird people, like, but that's like how a lot of this stuff actually is. Like, the only reason that, like, a lot of the conspiracy theory stuff now seems a little bit more, like, it has more cultural cachet is just because it's easier for people to communicate. But, like, this is what, like, I don't mean to be, like, completely dismissive of UFO people, but, like, it feels like a UFO convention in, like, the 70s. It's just kind of like zany characters that, like, got picked up in the forest, and, they got anally probed by the little green men, and, like, that's almost what it feels like. And it's kind of how it was until all this stuff starts to proliferate and communities actually grow around it on the internet and stuff. Like, now it seems like
dangerous.
Yeah, right. But, like, that is how a lot of, like, these, like, really out there theorist types, they are weirdos. Like, and I don't mean to just, like, pick on people that are into, like, harmless stuff like Bigfoot and, like, UFOs and stuff. Like, I think these people are not to be equivocated with Holocaust deniers. Like, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just poking a little bit of fun at, like, the stereotype of, the guys in the woods with the night vision goggles on looking for Bigfoot. Like, they tend to be kind of characters, in a way.
For everyone at home listening, Taylor still, for the past 15 years, almost every year that I've known him, he has had hanging on his wall that, like, famous, like, I want to believe photo, like, poster hanging on
from
his
X-Files.
wall.
Yeah. No, like, this is why I'm trying really hard to make it, to draw a distinction, because I don't think that there's a moral equivalence between these people. I just, we have an image in our mind of, like, funny people that hang out at UFO conventions, and that's
right.
The only equivalence that I'm trying to make, is that
we
we expect fringe people to be a little fringe. And also I kind of made a little bit of a hobby out of studying conspiracy theories, because I think, for this exact reason, that a lot of the people are just really fun to to, like, study. They're just, like, there's characters. There's these really interesting people that used to just, like, call into Coast to Coast AM and talk about, like, interdimensional, Bigfoot coming down on flying saucers and everything's connected, and, but, I hope I don't get dragged too much on YouTube for seeming like I'm, like, making fun of people too hard, but
you're going to get clipped to hell on our UFOs on Reddit.
That's fine.
I want to take a
Go ahead,
bit
Jensen.
of a more serious tone. I think, Taylor, you maybe alluded to this, and it's near the end of the film, whenever Howard is having another conversation with Eichmann, and Howard asks him, "Do you think that you're guilty?" And he says,
I
"No."
wanted to bring that up, yeah.
And Howard scoffs and says, "Oh, so you're using the same defense as everyone else. You were just a good soldier doing what you were told."
Following orders, yeah.
Yeah. And Howard says something about the 6 million.
Yeah.
And Eichmann says, "I don't have to take credit for all 6 million. I can spare a few for you."
Yeah. I thought that was a great line. And wasn't in the book. Like I mentioned, in the book, that character is played a little bit more for laughs in a way. And I think they chose on purpose to kind of change the tone on him so that they could throw that banger of a line out, to really drive home, like, I mean, that ending kind of sequence. I thought that was really effective too. That was a good call.
For sure. Like, I missed the fact that we didn't get the line where he's like, hey, like, how do I get a publishing agent?
Published? Yeah.
Yeah. But for sure, like that line, like, it really drives home. Like, I think kind of the point of the book and what Vonnegut was getting across amidst all of the zaniness and the gallows humor is that, like, you are what you pretend to be. And we even see that a bit earlier in the film whenever he escapes from O'Hare, whenever he, like, at the concentration camp.
Yeah.
And he meets with his blue fairy godmother, and he finds out, like, there's only 3 people that knew who he really was. And he was like, only 3 people knew who I really was. And he was like, no, everybody else knew who you were too. Like, you,
Yeah.
you were like, what would you have done if Germany had won the war? Do you think you would have turned yourself in and be like, oh, I was a spy the whole time?
Yeah.
You helped us, but you pretended to be a Nazi, and you did it well, and you became one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They kind of added a little bit of flavor too, and they said that, I don't remember in the book that one of the people that knew was the president.
Yeah.
And I thought that was effective just because if those really were Goebbels speeches, which they may have been, he calls Roosevelt out all the time and, like, implies that Roosevelt is a secret Jew. That's, like, part of what he thinks is slander, essentially. And that was, like, another bit of, like, just a little extra flavor that I thought was good in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Rosenfeld.
Did you guys see the Vonnegut cameo?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that scene quite a lot, and that kind of gets back into a little bit of what I mentioned, that the movie kind of tries a little bit more to show him dwelling on the guilt of the Holocaust, essentially, by, that scene where he's on the street and seeing all these different people, and then you get a great Kurt Vonnegut cameo where he just kind of stares into the camera with just kind of this really pretty sad look on his face. And I thought it was great. It's just great to see Vonnegut, because he lived only about a decade more after this film came out. So, he wasn't around for a ton longer. So it was neat to see him on camera too.
Yeah. I would encourage people, if after finishing the entirety of this episode, going and searching on YouTube, because Vonnegut actually gave an interview, like, around the time that the movie came out. I don't know, it was like one of those, like, Charlie Rose type characters, like, sit down.
I think it was Charlie Rose. Yeah. Yeah.
And they talk about the book and the film and everything, and it's kind of it's cool hearing Vonnegut talk about this book that he wrote so long ago. Actually, that's where he gives this book the grade of an A, is in that interview.
Mm. And I also liked that. I found it kind of inspiring watching that interview, just because we'll link this in the show notes too, so you guys can also just listen to Vonnegut in his own words. But this was his second novel, and it kind of got, like, a little bit of a critical reevaluation a little bit around the time that this movie was coming out. And I think that, it kind of felt to me like he almost thought that the book, didn't really succeed when it came out, which is really, sad, because it's a great, great book. And so it was just kind of, it's always nice to see, like, artists that are, elderly. I think he was, like, probably in his 70s or so, kind of, talk about their career and, like, seeing new success for something that they wrote so long ago,
Mm-hmm. And yeah, just realizing the potency of their work.
Yeah.
How it's, grown,
mm-hmm.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we kind of got to this tail end of this movie, right, where he's finally let go and sitting in the street, and I think like the ending, I know I kind of dogged the pacing at the beginning just because you had to get to so many major plot points, and you had to your point, like transport Howard across different scenes. But I think like the pacing at the end is so good, like that, I think they did a fantastic job of letting him sit in his emotions and realizing that it's time for him to come to terms, and the scenes also with the Dr. Epstein and his mom are incredibly powerful, and those are really cool to see lived out on camera as well.
Yeah, I agree. I thought those were really, really good.
For sure.
So the final scene I thought was incredible. I like I said previously, the book, and I thought about this a lot, like why, and this is I'll start with a hot take. The film ending is better than the book, in a way. Now, that being said, this is just my opinion, by the way. That being said, the reason that it works better for me in the film is because of what I already talked about with the perspective of the book. In the book, you can't have it doesn't make sense for it to be a memoir and then have a first person account of the suicide. So instead, it's just heavily implied. He says, like, tonight's the night that I hang Howard W. Campbell Jr. for his crimes against himself, right? We talked about that at the end of the book episode. And it's a great ending in the book, but the added layer of him taking the typewriter ribbons out and braiding a noose and then just hanging himself immediately after finding out that he was going to get off, I thought was really, really good, personally. Again, a little on the nose, potentially, but I'm a sucker for on the nose occasionally. And the visual image of, the symbol of using the typewriter ribbons, I thought was really good, not in the book. And it was a great scene. I liked that it happened in the prison cell. I like that as soon as he reads the note and knows that he's going to get off, he's like, nope, I'm not getting off. And when that's the end, I thought it was brilliant, but what do y'all think? You don't have to agree with me, by the way.
Will, what do you think?
I mean, I agree with how well done the ending was. I think it was, there's a lot of gravity in that final scene. Again, I go back to the black and white, artistic choice. I think that really drove in just the weight of his decision, where he was, what he believed about himself, potentially, intentionally binary and color just to paint that black and white, narrative, dial that in a little bit more. I mean, I think there is also, I actually applaud the filmmakers for thinking about the creative choice of him using the typewriter ribbons. I think you could have used a sheet or something, just something, a cheap way out, but they did a really good job of just tying that together.
Literally.
Yeah, tying that together. I will say that, I mean, I think, and this partially could have been just because I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It didn't land in the way that the book landed for me, and also because you have that first person narrative, and I had been sitting with, with Howard W. Campbell Jr. for so long in his head dealing with this, to hear him say it in his own words in that way, I think was really powerful. So exactly where he is when he makes that decision. But the film does an absolute justice to that scene and that narrative and the impact, and probably did it about as well as you possibly could on screen.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a fair assessment. Jensen?
I'm kind of with Will. Like I thought that the way that they ended it in the film was really good. I lean towards saying I liked the book ending better, just because I really love that line, tonight I hang Howard W. Campbell Jr. for crimes against himself.
No, that's
like,
true.
I feel like,
That's true.
yeah, that really hits. But like I would maybe say they're both equally good. Neither one of them are better than the other, but different.
Yeah.
They're just different, and they're both good.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I try to be a little inflammatory for the for the YouTubes.
Yeah,
But no, I
if you-
agree. I mean, the book is more subtle. It also drives home a really interesting philosophical point right there at the end. That like he could like Vonnegut, and we talked about this in the book episode. But Vonnegut could have just as easily said that I hang Howard W. Campbell Jr. for his crimes against humanity, which is almost where you expect the line to go. And then he says against himself, and you're like, oh wow, there's something different going on than just this type of guilt is different. It's a different sort of guilt. So I agree with you. I think that they're different. Maybe one's not better than the other, but I was really surprised with how much I liked the ending of the movie, honestly, because I expected the exact same ending as the book. And so getting a little bit of a different flavor and with the added symbolic image. Also, while we're on the topic of symbolic images, he hangs himself in his cell and kicks over the table. The typewriter goes, tumbling off. And then you see that guard. And like one of the last shots is the guard looking at his dangling feet. And this is the guard that in the beginning of the book and in the beginning of the movie says that I bound one of the Nazi collaborators' feet. That was his job during the execution when they hanged him. And he has that great line about how he had tied down his luggage and had tied somebody's feet for a hanging, and both of those actions felt about the same. And then you get that visual image of the feet dangling with that character just kind of watching. I thought that was good. I thought that was a pretty smart way to bookend the film version.
Completely agree. So
we come down to the seminal question.
Yeah, the seminal question. Is the book better?
Will, you go first.
I'm going with the book. I think the movie was really well done, but I think my ultimate just judgment is the pacing, the subtlety, the backstory. There's so many layers that Kurt Vonnegut just wrote into the story. But I would still recommend everyone watch the film. Despite it not beating the book, in my opinion, I absolutely still recommend it.
I agree. And I don't think it matters which order you interface with those two things. I think that if you watched the movie first and then read the book, it would be fine. We happen to have read the book several times. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
I disagree. I think it is more important to read the book first and then watch the film.
Well, this is obviously my statement is granted that you're going to do both. It would be hopefully my recommendation
for sure. But I typically prefer that that order of reading the book first and then watching the film. It's always been my default, and I think what it provides is all of those subtleties that you learn from the book. The people that wrote the film or wrote the screenplay knew those things because they had to have read the book to have done the screenplay. Sure. And so all those things are in mind. And like, I would assume that if they do a good job, and I think that the filmmakers did a good job with the film, those things leak into all of their decisions to communicate those things, even if they can't put them on screen. Some filmmakers do better jobs than others, but whenever you meet the leader of the White Christian Minutemen and all those people, if you've read the book, you know his backstory. So when you hear him talk, you know all of that, and this character makes sense. And if you went in blind and just watched the film and hadn't read the book, then you're just seeing this weird psycho character that's obsessed with teeth for some reason, and you don't understand why.
Yeah, I actually, you've convinced me of your point. There's several things that I've said in haste in this episode that upon further reflection I would take back. That being one of them. But yes, the book is better. But I was very surprised with how good I thought the movie version was. Obviously, we mentioned great cast, some really interesting, just like cinematographic decisions. We kind of went over. It was a really good adaptation. Honestly, I generally find that book adaptations like this really bother me, and I thought this was really true. It was very true to the spirit of the book, which you don't always get. You often get reinterpretations, and I felt like this was pretty square, right in the bullseye of the intentions of the book. But for all the reasons that you guys have already explicated, I think the book is better.
There you have it, folks. So read books, watch movies as an extracurricular.
Yeah. Also, we should mention, if you are interested in watching this movie, it's actually like fairly available. You can rent it. I rented it on Amazon for like $4. Well worth it. I think Apple TV, you said you found it. YouTube, it's pretty widely available. Yep. So definitely give it a watch. I again recommend.
I'm really excited. I'm glad we did this segment. And I'm really excited about a couple others that we'll probably touch in future episodes.
Yeah.
Also because there's a few movies that I've watched and I haven't actually read the book adaptation. So I'm interested to see that.
We'll be doing
that counter and see how it plays out. But this has been great.
Yeah. So this will be an ongoing thing that we do. A little bonus for you guys. We will still have the mainline episode coming of our next group read for the book club. But we'll see you guys again for that discussion. But until then, thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.